Now let's review this afternoon's format for our candidates and the audience. The questions I will ask were developed by members of the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. Each candidate received the questions in advance. Each candidate will have a specific amount of time to answer the questions. Our timekeeper is Linda Kamori, and she'll let the candidates know when the 15 seconds are left to respond and when time is up. We respectfully ask that the candidates stay within the time allotted for each question. The seating arrangement we have today was determined randomly. You can see that the candidates are seated according to their districts. All of the candidates are running in the Democratic primary. There are no Republicans running in the House districts. I will rotate which candidate gives the first answer for each question, then the next person will answer, and so on. We'll receive the directions at question number 5. There will be no additional questions from the audience. Instead, we have asked the candidates to stay after the formal question and answer period so that you can visit with them. The League of Women Voters and the NAACP cannot endorse candidates, but all candidates are free to share campaign materials, seek volunteers, and answer additional questions. Now let me introduce our House of Representative candidates. In order as seated are Suzanne Wikle from House District 10, Brittany Hall and Brooklynne Mosley, House District 46, Logan Genovan from House District 46 originally planned to participate but could not be here today. Zachary Hawkins also will not be here today. So let's begin with our first question. It will begin with Suzanne. You have 1 minute. Why are you running for a seat in the House of Representatives?
All right, thank you, Ursula, and thank you to the League and the NAACP for hosting this forum today. The reason I decided to jump into this race when I found it was going to be an open seat this cycle is really twofold. One, I've worked in the policy and advocacy space for about 17 years on a variety of social policy issues, primarily children and family issues, healthcare access, particularly on Medicaid, and general economic support issues. And this was all after completing my MSW from KU. So that was a real driver, just knowing how impactful policy can be in people's lives, and having worked in the State House as an advocate and really understanding how that works. I thought this could be a very good opportunity for me and for me to be a good voice for the district. The reason I ultimately decided to do it was we have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I really want them to grow up in a Kansas that was very much like the one I grew up in, with very strong public schools, a strong safety net, and all of the things that families and children really need for all of their success in life.
Next we have Brittany.
Hato Hewikan, Brittany, Natisito, Kaka Wachisi. Hello everyone and good afternoon, my friends. My name is Brittany Hall. Kakawachisi is my Indian name. It is from Horse Clan and it means one who runs around. The main reason why I have decided to do this is because I do have a 6-year-old son who is in the audience. Mateo, raise your hand. That's my son right there. I have moved here in 2007 to attend Haskell Nations University, and since then I have grown up in this community and watched it grow, and not only within myself but within my peers and my colleagues. And I've really watched Lawrence go through some of the struggles that we've gone through since 2007, and I want to contribute to that and to make this place a better place for our future generations and for all generations. Yahweh, thank you.
Next we have Brooklynne.
First, thank you to the NAACP and League of Women Voters for pulling us together today, and also thanks for choosing to be here on your Saturday. There's a lot of places you could be and you chose to be here. I am running because I've been involved in Kansas politics since I moved here in 2013 after serving 10 years in the Air Force. I have been an advocate from everywhere from education to human rights to also workers' rights in this state. I have worked in Kansas politics. My first time working in Kansas politics was when I was a fellow for Organizing for Action for Barack Obama's organization. I was an organizing fellow, and then I stepped foot into Paul Davis's campaign in 2014, where I got a chance to talk firsthand to people and I got a chance to see the struggles of every individual who was worried about how they were going to feed their families, education funding. I am here because I am the best suited to not only be good on policy, but be good with the political strategy that we would like to see for us to grow the caucus in the State House.
Next, we will start with Brittany. We're going to question number 2. What would you do to strengthen voting rights for all Kansans? You have 2 minutes.
So voting rights have not always been there for our citizens. So with voting rights, for example, Mexicans didn't get citizenship until 1800s. Native Americans, we didn't get citizenship until 1924. So it's been 100 years that people such as Native Americans have been here but are not considered citizens until 1924. We definitely need to uphold what our sovereign treaty rights are. We need to uphold our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our state laws, our federal laws. You know, we have to combat these Republican theories and values. So those are some of the reasons why I want to help strengthen the rights, is because the people that have been forgotten about, traditionally marginalized communities, we have been forgotten about, and we shouldn't, especially when we have helped create these countries and these systems into something that we want to create a legacy that is beautiful. So those are a couple of reasons why I want to help strengthen the voting rights, because we have been here for a long time and we shouldn't let anyone else tell us because of who we are and what we look like.
Next, we have Brooklynne.
I've been registering voters in this state since 2013. I think many of us remember the confusing time when Chris Kobach created the 2 forms and how people didn't know which form to register voters on. So the first thing I'm going to do to strengthen voting rights in the state is that we need to remove the confusion in how we register voters. I think that when Brian McClendon created ksvotes.org, that was the best thing that ever happened to the state. We were able to easily register voters. I think one thing that we can do to strengthen voting rights is to make sure that voting is accessible, making sure that we have polling locations that are close by to people in rural and urban communities. For instance, when I was running the coordinated campaign that got Laura Kelly elected in 2018 in Dodge City, there was 2 polling locations, one that was largely used by the immigrant population and then the other immigrant, first generation, mostly people of color, and then there was one that was on the other side of town that was used by everyone else. They closed down the polling location for the one that was used by the meatpacking workers, and it made it very difficult for them to vote. We were part of, at the party, we ended up buying buses. We actually got Melissa Etheridge to sponsor a bus, but I think that that's one of the things we would do. We want to make sure that we are strengthening the voting rights by making sure that polling locations are accessible. We also need to increase education and outreach. The statistics shows that if someone does not vote by the age of 35, it is very difficult for us to get them and turn them into a voter. So we need to start that outreach. At the high school level, we see the League of Women Voters do that constantly, but not everyone has a primary influencer in their life that's going to get them to vote. And then the other thing is to make sure that we don't have more voter ID restrictive laws in the state. So that's what. So and then aspirationally, we should be reaching to implement automatic voting registration, and then we also should be trying to have same-day voting registration. But at the first onset, we need to make sure that polling locations are accessible, and that we also have the opportunity to not have restricting voter ID laws.
Thank you. Next, we have Suzanne.
Thank you. So if I was elected to this seat, I do anticipate we would see more attacks on voting rights from the majority party in the legislature. So you can certainly count that I would be voting against those, fighting against those, having conversations with colleagues behind the scenes to try to keep those away from the floor. Aside from that, things that I would support as a legislator to increase voting rights include many of the things that have already been named, including same-day voter registration, eliminating voter ID requirements, making it easier to register. And then I think a big one, which Brooklynne mentioned towards the end, is automatic voter registration. So at the DMV, you go in, you have a choice. You can opt in to register to vote, but if we could switch that to opting out, and it's an automatic voter registration unless you take action to not register, that has profound impacts. And for example, there are several states, about 5 states right now, that have asked authorities in CMS, which this is kind of wonky, oversees Medicaid in states, to automatically register people who are enrolled in Medicaid because they have all of the necessary information about citizenship, age, residence. The state of Oregon calculated if they could automatically register everyone who was eligible and also in Medicaid, that would get to about 90% of the eligible but unregistered voters in the state. Obviously that you need to be a Medicaid expansion state for that to have true impact. We will be one someday, and so thinking about these things in preparation for that can have profound implications in other areas.
Next, we'll go to question number 3, and it will begin with Brooklynne. Kansas overwhelmingly voted to protect women's reproductive rights in 2022. What would you do to protect these rights? You had 2 minutes.
As someone whose firm actually was actively involved, and I was actively involved in the mobilization team for the Vote No campaign, one of the first things I would do to defend people's reproductive rights, because it's for everyone, is that, for one, Kansas had overwhelmingly shown in 2022 that we've said no to restricting our freedom and yes to making sure that people have full access. So I want to make sure that the legislature does not do anything to roll back access to contraception or any kind of reproductive health services such as abortion. And then I will also work to ensure that decisions remain between a pregnant person and their doctor. There's not enough room for a pregnant person and their doctor and the government of Kansas in that room when they're trying to make those decisions. Additionally, I would support us having comprehensive sex education in our state to empower individuals to make informed decisions about their reproductive health. One of the things we always look at reproductive care like it's a woman's issue. This is a family's issue. Most people who seek out abortions already have children, and they are trying to make sure that they can afford the children that they have. So I will always continue to fight for those things because I've been fighting for those things my whole life.
Next, we have Suzanne.
Yes, so I'll just clearly state that I will always be an incredibly strong supporter for all reproductive rights, including the right to abortion, the right to contraceptive, IVF, whatever it is. Always will be a strong supporter of that. I am still of reproductive age. I have a 4-year-old daughter. It's very personal to me that we protect everybody's rights. If elected to this seat, I plan to work with leadership in the caucus to seek seats on 2 of the committees that would directly deal with this issue if it were to come forward, the Health and Human Services Committee and the Federal and State Affairs Committee. Assuming I was able to be on both those committees, it would be a top priority of mine to work as hard as I could to avoid bad things coming before the committee by building relationships with those other committee members, particularly the Health and Human Services Committee will have a new chairperson this session, and I would work very hard to build relationships there. Unfortunately, it probably would come to a hearing. We probably would be having discussions about it, and I can guarantee you that I will be a very loud voice on that committee, asking very direct and tough questions of proponents of harmful policies, and not letting them do this without being held accountable and having people understand who is behind these issues. And just to be clear, to echo what others have said, I do think we will continue to see attacks regardless of how strong our vote was in August of 2022. Clearly the message has not fully gotten through, and I think we'll see attacks not only on abortion rights but on IVF, birth control access, and other reproductive health care. And as I stated, I will always be a strong supporter of reproductive health care access.
Next, we have Brittany.
Thank you. So this is a non-issue that we need to take care of. This Republican democracy that we have, and Republicans, they are just wanting this, but we don't want that. I think Kansas has definitely shown that we do not want this. We all voted. I was a part of that 2022 vote when we were representing to say no to this. I believe everyone has their own choice, no matter how we identify as male, female, trans, multicultural. It does not matter how we identify. It is our body and our choice. No one should tell me if I should get no more tattoos. That's no one's decision but my own. No one should tell me what I should be able to do with my own body. And the same for everybody else. Kansas' opinion is clear that we do not want this, so let's continue that, and I will always fight for that to make sure that those rights of anyone and everyone is protected.
Next, we'll go to question number 4, and it will begin with Suzanne. The majority of Kansans support Medicaid expansion. Do you support the legislators' failure to bring it to a vote? Why or why not? What would you do if elected? You have 2 minutes.
I certainly don't support the decision of leadership in the legislature to not bring this to a vote. Let me be really clear. You will not find a stronger supporter for Medicaid expansion than me. I have worked on Medicaid access issues in my current position in over 15 states with advocates improving access to Medicaid in their states. I know how Medicaid expansion has played out in those states. I know where it's been implemented well, where it's been implemented less well, and what Kansas needs to do not only to pass Medicaid expansion, but to implement it in a way that it's truly accessible to those who will be eligible. What I would do, as I mentioned, I do plan to seek a seat on the Health and Human Services Committee if I'm in the legislature, which would be dealing with this directly. I would be talking about Medicaid expansion all the time in conversations with my colleagues, in conversations with the other chamber, in conversations with the governor's office. It would always be on the table for me. I will never stop talking about Medicaid expansion. And then when we do get to a point where there's another hearing and we have people coming in who are opposing Medicaid expansion, again, I will be the expert in the room. I have worked on this issue for over 15 years. I can ask them questions they can't answer, honestly, without lying, and I will hold them accountable and I will put them on the spot. That is what I will do. And I'll also say, my other note is, a lot of this depends, right, on if the supermajority is broken in the House and the Senate. These seats up here are not going to determine whether or not the supermajority is broken, but I'm committed after the primary to be working with other candidates across the state to help those who are in districts where it can make a difference in the supermajority, breaking the supermajority, because that really does have a true impact on whether or not we can make progress on Medicaid expansion and so many other important issues.
Next, we have Brittany.
Thank you. So this issue is very near and dear to my heart. 73% of Kansans want this Medicaid expansion. We definitely need it. I have been out there canvassing the neighborhoods and meeting our citizens within District 46. Even this morning in East Lawrence, I met a woman who told me, oh, I just got over and survived cancer and I'm not in remission. I'm like, that is so awesome. And we just have these conversations about this. My mother unfortunately passed from kidney failure, and so she had to go through dialysis. And going through her medical records, even looking at each month, even after insurance, and her being a senior citizen, an elder in our community, and being on a fixed income, how was she supposed to pay for $1,000 after everything, or even $300 or $500 when she only has about $1,500 to $2,000 coming in each month because she is on a fixed income? I even met a man in North Lawrence who, same thing, he moved here from Missouri with his wife to live in Lawrence because of our community, and he told me that his wife was just diagnosed with kidney failure as well, and so she's going through dialysis and they're struggling. So these stories are happening to our communities, and just seeing what happened with my mother and watching that and getting to know her friends from Babcock Place just down the street, it's just really remarkable to know that these stories are happening, but some of the Kansans don't want it, but some of us, we do want that. And so I will always fight for this because I know how important it is. Thank you.
Next, we have Brooklynne.
So I'm a strong proponent for Medicaid expansion. First, I'm going to talk about the economic impact, but then I'm going to talk about the moral imperative that we have to expand Medicaid. If we expanded Medicaid, it would give us $1.3 billion in federal funds that we are already paying into the government. We are actually subsidizing other states' Medicaid expansion. This will bring in 23,000 new jobs, and then it will also help 150,000 Kansans get the coverage that they deserve. This is a moral issue. It's no longer an economic, it's a moral issue for us to expand Medicaid. My sister's in the back of the room with my niece. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about like why my family is lucky to have always had access to medical care that is affordable, and why that shouldn't be a luck of the draw. My niece was born at 26 weeks gestation. My sister's water broke in my house at 24 weeks, and we did not know, and actually said, oh girl, you can wear my pants now, and I gave her a pair of pants, and we went to Lady Bird Diner, and it wasn't for the fact that she lived in Westport at the time, that she stepped into St. Luke's Hospital, where they told her, ma'am, you are not leaving here until you have a baby. My niece and my sister probably wouldn't be here. She spent 2 weeks in the high-risk pregnancy floor, and my niece spent 73 days in the NICU. For a lot of families, that would have bankrupted them. I think my sister's medical bill was less than $500 overall after all that said and done, because she has access to good insurance. It should not be a luck thing. Everyone has the ability to be sick. In 2017, I had to get major surgery. The reason why I was able to not go broke from that major surgery and also have access to the things that I need, because I am impaneled through the VA. It should not be a luck thing. It should be a thing that we are working towards. So I will always fight for all Kansans to have access to Medicaid, because all of us have the ability to be sick and to need medical care. It is no longer, this is no longer about gamesmanship. This is about the moral imperative, because we all have the ability to be sick.
Next, we'll go to question number 5. We're going to reverse the order. It'll begin with Brooklynne. Are you satisfied with the way our current legislator has funded public education, including special education? Why or why not? Please explain. You have 2 minutes.
I am satisfied that Laura Kelly is working as hard as she can to get fully funded public education, but I don't think that any of us should be satisfied at the level that we are funding public education. When Sam Brownback devastated our schools, it set us behind by a decade when it comes to school funding. So all the money that we're putting in is from us being in a deficit to begin with. So like I said, I am not satisfied. One of the things that I've been doing since I do not have children in the school system. I do not plan to have children in the school system. I am a dog mom through and through. But even with that being said, in 2015, after working on Paul Davis's race where education was a big part of it, I laced up my shoes and I walked to Topeka with Heather Owsley, who is now on the Shawnee Mission School Board for public schools, not because I had a child in the school system, but because I was a public school kid and people invested in me, and I believe that we should be investing in our kids no matter what. One of the things that Kansas is one of 4 states that's the gifted and talented program goes through special education. Anytime that we are not fully funding those schools, we are letting down our best and brightest in our community. So I'm gonna always fight to fund public education. That's why I am the only person in this race that has been endorsed by the KNEA. I am gonna also, as a legislature, I'm gonna fight for us to to increase school funding, to make sure that we are not bringing in harmful bills that will deduct school funding, to make sure that we're not doing wonky math to fund public education that's going to take away from other individuals. Our school board has had to make hard decisions because of school funding. Hard decisions like, do we keep this student, do we keep this school open, or do we pay our teachers? This is a retention issue. We are causing it. We are number 35 in the country when it comes to teacher pay. We are creating a Teach for America model in our public schools, and we need to be fixing that, because I, for one, have benefited from great public schools. Thank you.
Next, we have Brittany.
Thank you. So the school systems, yeah, there is a fly up here. With our school systems, we're losing our teachers. We are failing some of our students. You know, we think about where we're at right now. We're in the after effects of COVID, and COVID took all of our brains for 2-3 years. And so that definitely took some of our students, and they did not have those resources to thrive in our environments and their environments, whether that's home, community, and then in the schools. With our public education, we need to fight more, and I will always fight for our schools and our children. As Brooklynne stated, I completely agree with a lot of the points she says, and I could not love that anymore, but I do have a child in our school system, and I have watched and grown with him to watch his development, and not just him, it's just his classmates as well. We live in Pinckney neighborhood, and so we were affected by the school closures of Broken Arrow and Pinckney. and getting rerouted to a new school. So my son cannot grow up in that community environment of going to his neighborhood school. And I think about, it's not just him, it's also our neighbors down the street. And every child deserves to have that full education, that human connectedness, for that familia. We need to make that a priority, and education is definitely a priority within myself and within my community. The special educations and everyone who goes to schools, we can do better for them, and I encourage us all to move forward in that. Thank you.
Next we have Suzanne.
Am I satisfied with the current funding levels from the legislature? I'm very satisfied that the governor has compelled the legislature to meet funding legal requirements aside from special education. I don't think I would say we are, quote, fully funded until we truly make back all of the losses that we had during the Brownback years. And I think that is a huge issue. And the special education issue, it seems like there was significant headway made this past session with the kind of down payment of special education dollars, but my understanding is that next session, the school finance formula is likely to be opened up, revisited, and potentially completely rewritten. And so I think that there is a lot of potential there. There's also a lot of potential danger there, depending on who's in the legislature and what decisions that they're making. In my discussions with the Lawrence Education Association, I learned that that's when I learned that the 497 school board has been spending about $10 million of their revenue to fill that special education hole that the state is not funding. And I think that really speaks to why we need strong legislators in Topeka fighting for truly fully funding schools so that our locally generated dollars aren't being spent to fill holes that the state is really obligated to fill, and we can use those monies in other ways. This question is about public education, and I think it was really meant to be about K-12, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, to me, public education is not just about K-12. It's about early childhood education and childcare, and it's about higher education. I am 100% not satisfied with the investments from the states in early childhood and childcare. We've done a lot. There's so much more we need to do. I pay more for my daughter to go to childcare every year than the tuition is at KU. This is a significant problem for families that I hear about at the doors all the time. And higher education should be public.
Next we'll go to question number 6. We'll begin with Brittany. What is the role of the state legislator in addressing the move toward renewable energy and energy conservation? You have 2 minutes.
So with energy, we have to subsidize and incentivize that. We need to be able to provide opportunities to train anyone and everyone that wants to learn to do these jobs, and to have those opportunities. I'm on the board at Peaslee Tech. We definitely provide that within our community. Sorry, closer. And work with our local communities. That's something that we do very well, and I'm very, very happy, and we strive. And fun fact, we just had our 10-year birthday the other day. So with our communities, we want to do more, we don't want to do more harm than good. We want to do more good within our communities. I can say, as a Native American person who is a Shawnee woman, we are stewards of this land. We are the original land takers and caregivers, and that's something I always try to practice to help decolonize myself and teach that to my son. With being on the board at Haskell Nations University, we are opposed of anything that could harm our wetlands, and that was an example from about a few months ago. We are in opposition of the new Boston Crossing because we believe that would affect our wetlands and our stewardship to these lands that are so beautiful that we grow our medicines. And so with energy, I do believe that energy and having that is great, but we also want to help take care of our lands while we do this.
Next we have Suzanne.
As I was preparing for this question, I had a conversation with an advocate in the state who does really great work on renewable energy work, because this is one of those areas where I feel like I kind of know enough, but I have a lot more to learn, which I'm eager to do. And I think what came out of that was really interesting, was that There are things the state can and perhaps should do to incentivize renewable energy, but one of the best roles I think the legislature has coming up is that there are billions of dollars poised to come into Kansas for energy conservation and renewable energy sources from the Inflation Reduction Act that Congress passed as part of kind of part of COVID renewal or reaction. But through the IRA and the Inflation Reduction Act, we'll have almost $1 billion available to Kansans to use in their homes. This is both for homeowners, renters, and landlords to upgrade energy efficiency appliances, and make, do energy audits and do the things that need to be done. I think the role in the legislature here is making sure that state agencies are doing everything they can to make sure they're drawing down as many of those federal dollars as they can in Kansas, and that they're setting up those programs so that they're accessible for Kansans, right? So it's not totally bureaucratic red tape in order to be able to access those dollars, but that the agencies are designing those programs and implementing those in a way that's truly accessible for Kansans. And then I'll just say that I think in terms of long-term planning in the state and energy plans, I think one role of the legislature is to work with state agencies and hold them accountable that those plans are truly based on science, and that is what's leading the work.
Next we'll have Brooklynne.
The state legislature could play a very crucial role in more energy conservation and renewable energy. Part of that is making sure that we are incentivizing and investing in it. Outside of incentivizing and investing in energy conservation, I think there needs to be an awareness program. There are a lot of great programs out there that will help individuals who would like to make their home more energy efficient. And a lot of times there's this awareness issue, so I think that the state government also has an imperative to make sure that we're informing people on policies. I'm actually working, one of my clients at my firm, we as a state that we are working to make sure that homeowners know for the IRA that they can do things to make their homes more energy efficient. But I think that the government can play a strong role in that. And then also just making sure that we are taking advantage of any program that's going to also bring in those energy efficient jobs. When I worked at the VFW National Headquarters, one of the things that I did was work in employment services for veterans who were just getting out of the military. One of the fastest growing industries was renewable energy. That's wind energy, that's solar energy, and a lot of veterans were able to start up businesses. We have about 150,000 veterans in our state that can also benefit from programs like that coming into our state. So I think that is about incentivizing and making sure that we go as hard for energy efficient programs and as hard for energy efficient businesses as we go for the Panasonics out there, and then also making sure that we are bringing awareness, because a program and a resource is not a program or a resource if people don't know about it.
Next we'll go to question number 7. It'll begin with Suzanne. As a new legislator, what will you do to be prepared for day one at the legislative session? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think if elected to this position, I would be well positioned to hit the ground running on day one. As I stated earlier this afternoon, I did spend 6 years working in the State House for a children's advocacy organization. It was called Kansas Action for Children. In that role, I spearheaded all of our children's health policy bills and budget items. So I worked with legislators on both sides of the aisle. I worked with committee members. I arranged hearings with committee chairs. I provided testimony. I prepared others to provide testimony. I'm very familiar with the workings of the State House, so I don't think that there would be a significant learning curve for me in that respect. I think what I would be doing between the election and the session to really prepare is to meet with as many stakeholders in the community as possible. And I've already met with several of those, but that would include educators, 497 representatives, LMH, KU, the Chamber of Commerce, social service providers, anyone in the community that will meet with me for me to understand what their priorities are from the legislature, what their working relationship has been historically with the legislature, what they want that working relationship to look like, and how we can be partners to make sure that Topeka is doing everything we can to support Lawrence, and that the Lawrence needs are being voiced in the Topeka legislature.
Next we have Brooklynne.
Echoing on what Suzanne said, I will be meeting with as many stakeholders as possible going ahead into the legislation session. I've already started to have those conversations with individuals and making sure that I am reading, going back and looking at legislation that has passed, that has failed, looking at what Governor Kelly has vetoed. That's one of the things I will do to make sure that I am ready on day one. I'm also going to just make sure that I am well prepared and informed. One of the things about me is that I know that I do not need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to know who to talk to that is smarter than me on any given issue. So I will be leaning well into advocates and people who are doing the work and who have been doing the work. One of the things that also has gotten me prepared is that I am actually most of the people who have worked for me in the past on campaigns are already positioned in a lot of these advocacy organizations, from Kansas Appleseed to the ACLU to other organizations who are already doing the work on the ground. So I'll be leaning on those individuals that I already have built-in relationships with, and also leaning in with my colleagues, many of them who I've helped get elected to the state legislature in my previous campaign work in this state. So I think that the way that I'm preparing myself is just to make sure that I am reading as much as possible. I am doing my research. I am also talking to current and past legislators who are doing the work, knowing who my co-conspirators for good trouble can be in the legislature. So I'm very excited to be preparing now and also to be able to represent you all in January.
Next we'll have Brittany.
Thank you. So first day, that's always a fun one to think of, but to be realistic, after moving in a couple of boxes and getting situated within the office, I will be going around talking to our people that are in the office as well. So within my work at Haskell, I am already doing the work. I'm already talking to a lot of Republicans because they are advocating for our university, and Democrats. I'm already trying to work on that. I have been working on those positions already. Within the House, I will be looking at the committees, seeing where my best skills are fit, and to see where I would like to continue that. I have been talking to representatives that are already in the office to know what are the unforeseen changes that they think could happen. What do they want to see? What can we continue to work on? I will continue to do that and always do that. And most importantly, I have been talking to our voters and our citizens. I've been canvassing for the last 2 months and just getting to know everyone as possible and knowing our stories and what has impacted to make sure I am upholding that in honor.
Next we'll go to question number 8, in closing. It will start with Brooklynne. In closing, what additional important issues are facing the Kansas House that you're uniquely equipped to address? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, so in close, one of those key issues that is probably not going to be mentioned in any forum is that a lot of the political recruitment and strategy going into the next election cycle goes through the House leadership. And so one of the issues that we have is that every year in the last 2 sessions, Governor Kelly has broken her record on vetoes. And the one thing that has been the barrier between us becoming states like Missouri for bad policy, states like Tennessee, states like Louisiana, is that we have Governor Kelly. We are one of the few states that does not have a trifecta when it comes to Republican policy. So that means that you have the state house, you have the state senate, and then you have the governorship. So states like North Carolina, they're able to stop bad policy because they have Roy Cooper. In 2026, there's going to be a new governor. We're not guaranteed. If you look at history, we are not guaranteed to get a Democrat governor just based off the fact that it's really hard to hold that governorship for 3 cycles, of governors. And so one of the things that I want to say that this race is not just about 2024, 2025, and 2026. It's about the future that we want to build in Kansas. If we get another governor and we have a supermajority going into 2027, really bad policies can get through the state legislature, and we're not going to have a Governor Kelly who can sign that. So as a person who not only wants to be good on policy, I want to be good on actually the politics of the state and help us expand the legislature, which I have done time and time again. I've helped get the first LGBT indigenous person elected to the U.S. Congress. I have helped get LGBT members elected in Johnson County. I've helped get our first Chinese American representative elected into the state house. And so I know what we need to do to not only have good policy go through, but make sure that we are building a Kansas that can be worth fighting for in the future.
Next we have Brittany.
Thank you. So basically, why should you vote for me and what brings me most equipped to this? I think for me, my strong power is my lived experiences, and to see what I already described with you about with my mother, my identity being multicultural, Native American and Mexican American, and to show that we have these beautiful little souls that we should be fighting for, such as my son, and education, and to be transparent. And that is something that I will always be, is transparent, and to be kind, and to have an open heart and an open ear to anyone and everyone, to listen to that. We are all fresh voices for this. This is all of our first time running. I will be one of those fresh voices for this role. Just like the people of you in Lawrence, Kansas, and for the whole state, I will be that voice. I am a single mother. I know what it's like to work 2 jobs to make ends meet and to provide the future for my child, that he will never have those experiences that I had to go through. And so we always have to remember those who have been forgotten about, no matter what. So, Hini, Neki, Yahweh, thank you, and that is all.
Next we have Suzanne.
Thank you. Yeah, so the question about what additional important issues that I can help address in the House. I have a few things to mention. One, I mentioned earlier, childcare and early education. This is such a huge problem, and it has grown so much over the past decade or so. I've heard stories of families deciding to only have 1 child because they can't afford to have 2 children in childcare. I've heard hospitals say they can't retain nurses, particularly in more rural areas of the state, because there's no childcare for the nurses' children after they have a child. I've heard businesses say they can't retain employees after the employee has a child because there's no childcare available, or there's no affordable childcare. I sit on the board of the Community Children's Center here. I've done a lot of national policy work around childcare. I think I can be a very strong voice and advocate for some state solutions there. For the past decade, I've worked for national policy organizations. I work remotely here from Lawrence. In that role, I have a very broad view of state policy work in states across the country, in red states, in blue states, in purple states. I have kind of that perspective of what's coming if we do lose the governor's office, what's coming if, or like how can we better bring every side to the table if we can break that supermajority. So I have that policy expertise across the country in different states, and a lot of that expertise is also focused on implementation after policies are passed. So I think sometimes we pass a law and we think, okay, it's done, but really that's when the really hard work begins, and there's a really big role for the legislature to hold state agencies accountable in that implementation, and I can certainly bring that expertise to the House. Just from a pure knowledge and policy background, I have very, very deep expertise in all safety net programs and safety net policy work. And then I'll just say again, just having been on the other side of the State House, not elected, but working in the State House as an advocate, I really feel like I can hit the ground running and have a strong sense of how to represent the community well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all to all the candidates. I'd like to thank Suzanne Wikle, Brittany Hall, and Brooklynne Mosley for participating in our forums today. Thank you very much.